Good morning. Welcome to the meeting of the Hingham Municipal Light Plant Board, May 14th, 2024. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and all other applicable laws, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You're hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during the meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is there anyone else besides the light plant who would like to record this meeting today? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to move to the first item on the agenda, which is to welcome Ashley Muspratt and to ask Brianna to begin our discussion. We've been looking at notions for how to finance ratepayers making energy efficiency changes to their homes to save on their utility bills. And Ashley is going to present the program that they have been working with at the Ipswich Municipal Light Plant for our consideration. So thanks for being here. Brianna, do you want to introduce anything, or shall we go straight to Ashley?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Yes, so we have Ashley Muspratt, the President and CEO of CET, the Center for Eco-Technology, on the call. This is just a continuation of the financing discussion. So I don't mean to just reiterate what Laura said. So we can go ahead into the presentation. And then if you have any questions, please ask Ashley. She's more than happy to answer them. And I'm really grateful she could come on the call today.
Great.
Thanks very much.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for having me here today. I am always thrilled for an opportunity to talk about inclusive utility investments. I see some familiar faces. I think I met a few of you at some conferences last year, some meeting conferences. So great to see all of you again and great to meet new faces. I prepared some slides for this morning, so let me share my screen. Looks like I have that ability. Should be coming up. All right, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, well,
great.
No,
Yes, there we go. Yep.
Looks good now.
Okay, good. All right. So as Brianna said, and as the invitation implied, I'm going to provide an introduction to inclusive utility investments and talk you through the journey that we've been on with Ipswich and that we're starting with some other municipal light plants in Massachusetts. There we go. For those of you who don't know CET, we're a nearly 50-year-old environmental nonprofit. We're based out in Western Mass, but serve over a dozen states. Our mission is to innovate, implement, and scale the environmental solutions that communities need to thrive. We've got over 100 staff who are in people's homes and businesses every day, identifying opportunities to reduce waste, to improve energy efficiency, to convert buildings off fossil fuels, and then we hold those customers' hands through to implementation. We often like to say that we're in the business of removing friction and just working to help people go further and faster with decarbonization. We do quite a bit of work with municipal utilities. We are the administrator for MWEC's residential energy program, which is called Next Zero. We also provide residential energy services for Westfield Gas and Electric. We have some kind of special tailored programs for a couple of utilities in the state. And then in addition, we provide heat pump consultations, design reviews, and inspections to ensure that customers are getting systems that are optimally sized and configured and that they're going to be positive ambassadors for the technology going forward. We provide customer support services as well, customers being either your customers or utilities as our clients, providing training and webinars, incentive analyses. And then we've been doing some really great innovative work, including inclusive utility investments and developing a carbon-based incentive model. And I know that's a presentation that some of you saw last year. So Jumping right into inclusive utility investments, we've been kind of on this journey with Ipswich since 2020, when we first kind of started a search for solutions to the challenges that they identified, and that I think are probably pretty similar to the reasons that you have for looking for a financing mechanism. We moved into a feasibility study in 2021, followed then by a pilot, and now we're in a bit of a holding pattern, waiting to go into full-scale implementation as soon as they get approval for their line of credit, which I can talk a little bit more about. In addition, we've gotten some funding to provide support to the next cohort of utilities in Massachusetts looking to design and develop their own IUI program. So let's just start with why IUI. I think there are two big reasons. One, the race to decarbonize is on. We're, looking to help customers, adopt decarbonization solutions, be it energy efficiency or electrification. And we want to make sure that, adoption is equitable, that all customers in the utilities network have access to these solutions and are adopting them at similar rates. And that's, I think, really where IUI stands out from other financing options. So in the case of Ipswich, when they came to us looking for a financing solution, these are the kind of metrics that they were looking at. They found that, when they surveyed their customers, a big percentage of them said upfront capital cost was the biggest barrier to adopting recommendations in the audit reports that we were providing. This is an important one. They found 80% of the customers who were taking advantage of incentives offered by the utility lived in homes above the median value. So this is sort of a proxy for the fact that, people accessing incentives were, by and large, people of more means. And then there was a whole set of customers who probably could have really used the support, but weren't even taking advantage of the program. Similarly, they found over 95% of those accessing incentives were homeowners, despite having a third of their customers being renters. And they know that they have nearly half the town who is low and moderate income, and a big chunk of those who are cost burdened. And so they came to CET wanting to figure out how they could enhance or redesign their program to capture this huge segment of their population that clearly wasn't participating in their program. And that's when we found what was then being more commonly referred to as tariffed on-bill financing. We've since seen a transition to calling it inclusive utility investments. But this mechanism is one where utilities make the investments in the building measure. So it's on-bill financing, but it's not a loan to the customer. It's the utility making these investments in the building measure. And then they recover that investment through a tariff tied to the meter. And this is a really important distinction from other on-bill financing, where it's a loan to the customer and payback is in one particular customer's name. And as such, there's, a credit check that happens. There's, the need for that customer to own the property. And that customer needs to anticipate being in their home long enough to get a positive return on their investment. They have to have an appetite for debt as well, even if they pass the credit check. The other distinction is that with tariffed on-bill financing or inclusive utility investments, the tariff is guaranteed to be less than or equal to historic energy costs. So there are a lot of buffers that are used to ensure that customers are kept whole. So when these investments are made in the property and then they have this new tariff on their bill, the sum of their electricity bill and these tariffs will keep them whole. They'll be paying less than or equal to what they had previously paid for their energy costs. That would be, if they had an oil or gas furnace and they converted to heat pumps, that historic energy cost would be inclusive of what they were paying for their fossil fuel heating. And because of these like really key characteristics of inclusive utility investments, this gives very broad access to the program. So it unlocks access to participation for renters and for low-income homeowners who are left out of most programs and financing tools. So it sounds kind of scary, but I want to take you through some really compelling data that shows that, in fact, this is a program that has been up and running in a number of utilities for quite a while with some really, really great results. So this map is showing where in the US there are active IUI programs. They're in 13 states, plus I'd like to say Massachusetts. We're talking to the EPA about getting added to their map. Some of these programs have been in operation since the early 2000s. This chart here is showing the comparative impact of inclusive utility investments compared to other financing programs. And PAYS is an acronym for Pay As You Save, which is a trademarked version of inclusive utility investments. So the blue bars are inclusive utility investments and the orange more standard loans. So you can see that customer eligibility doubles, offers accepted increases by 5x. So again, we're achieving that goal of accelerating uptake and deployment of these measures, and deal size doubles, meaning people are on average more likely to do deeper energy retrofits, deeper decarbonization retrofits than with other financing options. And as commissioners of the board, I think this is a really important slide for you all to take in. The data from these programs shows that this is an incredibly secure investment for utilities. So data from 16 programs, I have the source hyperlinked here, and I will share the slides after the program so you can, after the presentation, so you can dig in. But there's a 99.9% overall collection rate for these programs. As I said, some of them have been in operation since 2002. In total, they've deployed over $50 million in energy upgrades to buildings, and they've had over 4.2 million participating buildings. So I think on the surface, IUI can seem like a risky model for utility, but the data definitely shows otherwise. And then I want to present this alternative analysis that just looks at some of the characteristics of inclusive utility investments compared to other financing options. So I've got on this table the Mass Save Heat Loan. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's a 7-year zero interest on-bill financing mechanism that Mass Save offers. It's a loan to the customer. So it's a loan that's in an individual's name. There is a credit check. A home equity loan, I'm assuming 10 years, 7% interest, and then of course just paying out of pocket. So what I'm trying to show here are the comparative characteristics of the program. You can see in terms of upfront costs, a lot of financing mechanisms are able to eliminate upfront costs. So the heat loan, home equity loan, and inclusive utility investments. Some of these mechanisms also provide a no interest option. Like I said, the Mass Save Heat Loan is zero interest. For Ipswich, IUI will be zero interest. This, could depend on the cost of capital that the utility has, but typically these are zero interest, just fixed tariffs on a customer's bill. Importantly, with IUI, there's no credit check. So whereas with Mass Save and the home equity loan, there's a really high bar to entry and access. With IUI, as I explained, that's not the case. And then I think, again, another really key distinction is the fact that it's not a single payer. So with the Mass Save Heat Loan or a home equity loan, it's tied to one individual, and that one individual is burdened with the entirety of the payment. Whereas with IUI, since the payback is tied to the meter, as occupants either sell their homes or move out as renters, the next occupant takes over the tariff. It just passes on to the next person. And since these are cost saving investments in the property, there should not be there shouldn't be an issue with future occupants. In fact, it should make the building a more appealing option. On the far right, I'm showing like comparative payment. And the point I want to emphasize and convey here is that with inclusive utility investments, you are saving at an almost equal rate that you are paying. And so IUI is sort of a no-brainer to participate in, whether you think you're going to be in your building for 1 or 2 more years or 20 more years. So unlike a mass save loan or a home equity loan, where you really need to not only know you'll be in that building for the tenure of the loan, but then for some years after to actually reap the benefits. With IUI, you are saving from day one, so it makes sense to participate. And this is one of the ways that we can really accelerate deployment of these solutions, because the data show that people chronically underestimate how long they'll stay in a property, and as a result put off home improvements. Okay, so now I want to pivot to some of the details and outcomes of the work that we've been doing with Ipswich. I'm going to kind of go quickly through some of the results of our feasibility study, which I said we did back in 2021. There were 3 components to the study. Market analysis, looking at whether this was a program that residents would be interested in. A measure analysis, looking at on average which measures we could finance with inclusive utility investments and where we thought we would really see an acceleration of uptake. And then we did the economic and regulatory study, looking at the business case analysis from the perspective of the utility and the regulatory landscape in Massachusetts. So we had overwhelmingly positive results from the residential survey. A full 75% were just outright interested. Another 17% were, or 12% needed more information or were neutral. And it was only 12% who, at the time of the survey, said no thanks. This kind of interest in the program has been further validated by a overwhelmingly positive vote at the town meeting that allowed Ipswich to pursue this line of credit that they're accessing to capitalize the program, and evidenced by the calls that CET is getting and that Ipswich Utility is getting, customers wondering, when can we get access to this program? When is it starting? So there's a lot of buzz and a lot of positive interest. CET, as part of this feasibility study, looked at all the various measures that we were most interested in getting into people's homes: efficiency and electrification, including weatherization, heat pump hot water heaters, solar, battery, etc. We looked at 3 housing types. So we kind of looked at the housing stock in Ipswich and characterized it in terms of 3 types. We had a 2-bedroom apartment, what would be considered a small house in Ipswich, and what would be considered a large house in Ipswich. And we looked at what would be, what, if anything, would be the upfront cost for financing these measures in people's homes. What would be the tenure of the tariff on the bill? What would be the size of the tariff? And what we found is that we could easily finance weatherization, solar, heat pump, hot water heaters. If there was a good efficiency opportunity, so we could bundle heat pumps with weatherization, that made heat pumps a lot easier to finance. We did find that the utilities incentives were still really important. Like IUI can't IUI can't take the place of incentives. Those are important for bringing the remaining capital costs down so that these measures can be financed this way while still guaranteeing the customer save money. But with those incentives in place, we felt like IUI is going to help us go a lot further and faster. And then finally, from the utilities perspective, we used a firm called Clean Energy Works, which is probably the national leader in building awareness about inclusive utility investments. They've worked with many of the existing utility programs. They modeled a strong return on investment for Ipswich, estimating about $10,000 per participating customer. This was a result of controlling infrastructure costs, smoothing demand, increasing the kilowatt hours sold. And then there's, of course, from Ipswich perspective, a really great customer engagement benefit. Okay, so now I'm going to move into the pilot, which just happened quite recently. To prepare for the pilot, we had 4 key steps. One was developing the terms and conditions. So the Pay As You Save program that I mentioned a few slides back has kind of open source materials for everything they've done. So we took their terms and conditions as a starting point, and then worked with KP Law, Ipswich's law firm, and I understand they work with a lot of the utilities to adapt the terms and conditions for Ipswich for Massachusetts. So we have detailed terms and conditions that we have since made open source and are happy to share with all of you. We built a kind of plug and play IUI offer tool. So CET uses Snug Pro for our energy audits, and we built an integration with Salesforce, which we use as our CRM, so that it pulls in, Salesforce is pulling in the estimated savings for the recommended measures. So what the annual savings is likely to be when you weatherize your home or when you install heat pumps. And then the model that we built in Salesforce calculates what the upfront cost is, if anything, what the size of the tariff is, and the number of months of the tariff. Let me just explain a little bit about this upfront cost that I've referenced a couple of times. So as I said, with inclusive utility investments, you want to ensure the customer that the financed component of the investment is saving them money or keeping them, at least cost neutral. So in some instances, we find that the capital cost, of a heat pump system, for example, is too high to make that guarantee. And so we finance the portion that can generate those savings, and then anything in excess needs to be paid in the form of an upfront cost. The buffers that we use, it's often referred to as the 80-80 rule. So the maximum amount of money that we can recover toward the capital investment is 80% of the estimated savings. So simple numbers, if you estimate $1,000 in savings, the max that you can recover toward your tariff is $800. And then there's a second buffer that's there again to make sure the customer is kept whole, which is the maximum tenure of your tariff is 80% of the measure life. So if your measure life is 20 years, the maximum tariff period would be 18. So once you kind of calculate the amount you can recover, taking into account that 80-80 rule, then if there's a balance, that would be the upfront cost. Okay, so moving on, the third bit of preparation work was to just work out the sort of labor and financial flows between CET, the utility, and the contractors. And the fourth was to ready the billing system for the tariff, which in the case of Ipswich, I know is very simple. I don't know exactly what software they use, but the GM there I know would be happy to talk to you about it. So the objectives of our pilot were to demonstrate the use of IUI across multiple customers, to validate the potential to finance priority measures, and then to develop collateral that we could disseminate and learnings to facilitate scale up to other utilities. I just get some results here from the projects that were completed. So as of creating this presentation, we had completed 3 projects. All of them were single family oil heated homes. We had gone into this in, really wanting to have a renter, and for reasons kind of unrelated to IUI as a mechanism itself, the renter we had dropped out. So we haven't served a renter yet, but it is a sort of major priority as we get going when we go to scale. The customers that we did serve had a range of size home. One of them was a low-income customer, one was a first-time home buyer, one was kind of an emergency heating system replacement. And in each case, we did weatherization and heat pumps, and in one of them, there was also a heat pump hot water system. I've just got some quick results here. So what you're seeing in this bar chart is the total cost of these upgrades to the home. So the average total was around $35,000. Out of that, we were able to finance about $23,000 using inclusive utility investments. The utilities incentives amounted to about $6,000, and that left on average about a $6,000 upfront cost for the customer. In the case of the low-income customer, that upfront cost was brought down partly by the utility and partly by a community climate fund that CET runs. So, in total, we eliminated 84% of the upfront costs, and for, the other customers, like when they saw a $6,000 price tag as opposed to, the initial $35,000, they were very, very happy with that outcome. So for the portion that was financed, we maintained the 20% annual savings. So what you're seeing here is the dark bar, the dark blue bar is showing the annual savings estimate, and the lighter green bar is showing what the total savings is. So you can see that each homeowner is keeping money in their pocket every year compared to what they've historically been paying for their energy costs. And then finally, one of the outcomes of our pilot with Ipswich was to develop this toolkit for working with utilities to develop their own programs. We have this toolkit posted online with lots and lots of resources and more detail. But as a quick summary, we kind of imagine it's about a 12-month process to go from kind of the stage that you're in now, kind of exploring IUI, through to having run a pilot and being ready to go to scale. Securing capital financing can be one of the more time-consuming pieces, depending on where you are thinking about securing your capital. In the case of Ipswich, they qualify as a rural utility, so can access this USDA loan, but it will be almost exactly a year from the time they apply for it to get the funding. So it's something that you would need to probably start early on. But with that, let me say thank you. Make sure everyone sees my contact information, and open it up for any questions if there's time.
Okay, there certainly is time. Let me first ask the board members or the staff if you have questions or discussion.
I have a question.
Yes, Joan.
So would each customer have the same amount of tariff, or is it cost specific to each particular customer?
Yeah, it's a great question. Tariffs are tailored to the customer. So there's a standard approach to calculating the tariff, but it would be different for every home.
So it sounds like it's going to be a little complicated as far as implemented that in the billing system. That sounds like everyone's going to have a separate rate then. Can you shed some light on what it shed some light on what you did, or?
Yeah, so CET really had like nothing to do with that implementation. So Dylan Llewellyn at Ipswich would be like the best person to talk to, but according to him, it was very easy to, so once a customer has their equipment installed and the tariff is ready to commence, they do enter the tariff for each measure on the customer's bill, and then it automatically drops off after the the set number of months. But it does need to be added. It's not a rate, it's a separate line item on the bill.
So it's not based on kilowatt hours at all. It's just,
No.
it's a fixed rate for
It's a
that
fixed-
particular customer, and every customer could have a different amount of fixed rate.
Yep. And if a building for whatever reason is unoccupied and the power is just like off for a couple of months, the collection would be delayed and then it would pick back up. So there's, if it's a 100-month tariff, you might collect it in 100 months, or you might collect it in 110 months if over the period of that time there are like buckets, but you would always get your 100 months worth of collection.
Okay, so then how could a renter participate if they don't own the property? How could they make a landlord obligated to pay this?
The renter would pay it, assuming they pay their utility bill. In most cases, and with the utilities I've spoken with, when a unit is empty between renters, the landlord picks up the utility bill. They're not like cutting off power, so they would be on the hook for the payment during those periods. We do have a separate agreement for the landlord. So in the case of a rental unit, the landlord does have to agree to this. But like, talk about an incredible opportunity for the landlord, right? Like typically, the landlord's on the hook for making the full capital investment in the building's new heating system or in whatever it is. Now they're not making that capital investment. If there's an upfront cost, surely, I would expect the landlord to take on that piece. But in the case of the ongoing payments, if it's the renter paying the utilities, they'll make those payments, but it's a win-win. The landlord's getting, increasing the value of their property. The tenant is getting lower utility bills, a healthier, more comfortable unit. So I think it works out for everyone.
The landlord. Okay, my last question is, who polices the eligibility for the program? Who determines?
Yeah, so ultimately Ipswich signs off. If I'm talking about the case of work we've been doing with them, they sign off on whether or not we move forward with a customer. The two biggest things that we're concerned about with eligibility, assuming there are good opportunities in the building. One, the customer, the initial customer has to be in good standing with their bill. So Ipswich is not going to move forward with a customer who has, is currently or has a history of being lapsed on their bills. And then the other thing that they're looking at is the state of the building. You're obviously not going to make an investment in a system with a 20-year lifespan if the building's needs to be torn down. So those are really the two things that they look at when they're deciding.
Okay, so it's not really anything financial on the customer's part, it's just if their bill's in good state. So we're not gonna be looking for tax returns. We're not gonna make sure they qualify.
No. And again, this is saving the customer money. So this should, if they're kind of living paycheck to paycheck, this should help, not hurt them. There are a lot of really good consumer protections built into this program to make sure that lower income customers are protected.
Okay, thank you.
Ashley, I know you said Ipswich funded this through a grant, a rural utility grant, which obviously we don't qualify for. Do you know how much funding that was?
Yeah, so the USDA Rural Utility Service is a loan. It's a line of credit. It's zero interest. So in that sense, it's a loan that they will need to be paying back. They initially applied for, I'm pretty sure, $5 million. That was kind of the lowest barrier to entry, but it's like a $100+ million line of credit that is possible. Now, what they did get a grant for was the pilot, and that was with the Mass Clean Energy Center. I know that Mass CEC is very interested in helping to promote the growth of IUI in Massachusetts. I'm not sure if like Hingham pays into the program that makes you eligible for Mass CEC funds. Ipswich did, and that's why they were able to get a grant for Mass CEC, whereas there are some other utilities I know in the MWEC network who aren't, who Mass CEC unfortunately can't fund.
I'm assuming that's through Green Communities, maybe?
That sounds right, yeah.
Ashley, who makes the decisions for what is installed in a customer's home? Is solar, for example, how is that evaluated? How is the insulation, the air sealing? What sort of system? Is it geothermal? Is it air source heat pumps? Is it air to water heat pumps? There's a lot of variables that I know CET's got expertise on, but who's actually making those recommendations?
Yeah, it's a collaborative decision. So let me start by saying, so for the pilot, we decided not to include solar just to keep it simple. Although when we did the analysis of solar, it pencils out like really nicely. It's a great investment, but so far the only measures that were eligible during the pilot were the 3 that I mentioned: weatherization, heat pumps, heat pump hot water heaters. CET energy consultants go into the home, conduct the audit. They do all of the speccing for weatherization so that they can produce a work order for a weatherization contractor. The outcome of that initial audit is the Snug Pro recommendation report. So we kind of look at the estimated savings by converting the system. We're looking at like the age of the HVAC system and so forth. We then produce the kind of initial IUI offer to get a sense of what, if any, upfront costs will there be, how long will what will be the tenure of the tariff, and what's the size. And then we talk to the customer about that, talk them through their options. Certainly ground source heat pumps are, like, for customers that want to explore that option, we definitely encourage it. And then in terms of the specific heat pump equipment, we have a network of HVAC contractors who we work with. A customer, we can either give names to a customer, or if the customer has a contractor they like, they go out. We encourage customers to get multiple quotes, up to 3. We then do the design review. So we look at the sizing and configuration of the system. Are they recommending ducted, ductless? We've been in the home. We know sort of what the we can go in and do like a manual J and get the heating demand. So we then work with contractors to like edit their quotes and their designs as needed before anything is installed in the home. So we offer a kind of a separate heat pump consultation service that is like a pay-as-you play kind of thing for the utilities. But in the case of IUI, we've made that design review like a compulsory necessary component, before any system is installed.
And that review goes as far as the manual J for each of
Yeah,
these?
in a lot of cases, yeah.
So you just look at the individual property and decide if you need to go that far with the review.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, and those costs are covered by Ipswich?
Yeah.
By the utility. Other questions, staff, board? Well, I have a long list of questions, but give me a second because I want to ask them in a sensible order that,
Okay.
that I wrote down. You said that you looked at 3 housing types. Was that in terms of the pilot program or the program in general that you would?
That was for the program in general as part of our feasibility study, which we,
Oh, I see.
you
Before
know,
you
we
got to the
could,
pilot.
yep, and we could do the same thing with Hingham. So we got data from the town records that was just showed us like ownerships, you know, square footage of the homes, the portion that was like condition, square footage, number of bedrooms, etc. And we just sort of broke that into 3 like archetypes.
So could you just tell me again what those 3 types were?
Yeah, we had a 2-bedroom apartment, then we had either a 15 or 1700 square foot home, and we had a 2500 square foot home, which, like I said, in the case of Ipswich, kind of captured the majority of the housing stock and represented the small end and the large end of, you know, homes there. If we were to go to, you know, Wellesley,
Or Hingham?
it would be a very, yeah, I'm not as familiar with how Hingham compares to Ipswich, but it, you know, it gave us a good sense of, you know, for different customer types, you know, what kind of upfront cost, you know, are you going to be looking at? And then you can get a sense of like, well, you know, would our customers be able to pay that, or what would we do to change our incentives to decrease that upfront cost? So we, during the feasibility study, we took into account Ipswich's existing incentives as well as mass save incentives for those customers in town who have gas, and we're able to.
So in this program, the size of investment is limited by the ability to save on the investment for the customer, right? I mean, that's the size of the investment that the utility makes is limited by how much, by making sure that the customer after the investment is made doesn't pay more to the light plant than they were paying before for their electricity.
Well, they'll almost certainly be paying more to the light plan than they were paying before, because in most instances you're getting customers switching off of
Right,
gas
of course.
or oil,
But you're
or
including
propane.
their former energy costs.
Yep.
In so that they wouldn't be paying more than their former utility costs, energy costs.
Yeah. So that's the piece that can be financed. But the way that we look at it is like, you know, our mission and what Ipswich wants to do is to accelerate, you know, deployment of whole home heat pump systems, whole home electrification. This is a way to get those systems in homes more affordably, because you go from either taking on major personal debt with often high interest rates, or paying an exorbitant amount of money upfront, which most customers can't do. In this case, you have a much more modest upfront payment in order to get that whole home system. And then the remainder of what you're paying is the piece that's financed. So it's not, we're not modifying recommendations when we see an upfront cost or to like get under the upfront cost. We're saying here, you can have a whole home heat pump system, weatherization, solar, induction stove for, you know, a mere, you know, 6,000 or whatever, as opposed to the 35, 40,000 or.
So it's like you'll finance the part of it that will ensure that they, and then they'll have to come up with the rest of it.
Right, which they could finance with a standard loan if they wanted, or, you know, for certain customer types, the utility could decide to buy down that upfront cost. Like I showed, Ipswich has an estimated $10,000 return on investment per customer that participates. So they want to bring customers in. If they have to pay an extra, couple thousand to get that customer to participate, it makes financial sense for them to do that. So they are thinking about, certain like eligibility criteria where they might buy that down, or you could, consider bumping up, incentives across the board. One thing that I think is really neat about IUI is that it does allow you to get incentives, if you want to, exactly right. Like, buying down that upfront cost is what it takes to ensure that then the customer is saving money. So, there are certain programs now wanting to give 100% incentives. I'm like, you don't have to give 100% incentives. Like, that's more than you have to do to get the customer to save money. But it gives you a sense of like not needing to pay any more or any less than what it takes to make this like a no-brainer for the customer.
That is a really appealing aspect of it to me. I realize that whatever Ipswich incentives are is a big part of, whether this is going to work or not. And I don't know how they compare with ours. But the idea of then being able to adjust the whole incentive program so that it helps people get over the last hump is really appealing. I have sort of despaired of the idea that we can't ever offer incentives that equal mass saves incentives. But this gives us an opportunity to offer something along with the incentives that means the incentives will be meaningful in terms of whether people make a decision to go forward or not. So that does have a big appeal, but we would have to do the feasibility study to really know, based on our current incentives, how that would work. Did Ipswich change their incentives after the feasibility study to kind of make that?
They have made some adjustments. Yeah, we had done an incentive analysis for them shortly before, but after the feasibility, they made some additional tweaks as well.
Interesting. I do feel like, though, at the end of all of this, a $6,000, let's just use your pilot for an example, $6,000 investment for somebody who's on the lower end of the earning scale can still be an insurmountable block. That's a big number. And for the customer in your pilot who had to replace their furnace anyway, not so much. That's, they were looking at that kind of investment anyway. But if somebody is not at that moment in their, in their trajectory, that seems like it would still be a stumbling block for people in the lower income category. So one thing that I wondered, if you have thought about the brand new green bank that the Commonwealth has established. It's a new program, which actually the legislation.
We're running it.
You are?
Yes.
Okay, so you know all about this. I just want to mention that the legislation to start the green bank was sponsored by our state rep here in Hingham. So I'm familiar with the concept, and I wonder if that $6,000 can be paired with a loan from the green bank, to help at least spread out the cost of that initial. It's still the initial upfront hit that causes the difficulty, especially for lower income people. And so is that another tool that you could bring into the picture to help people who really do not have $6,000 in their bank account to put towards this, to help them get over the hump?
Possibly. We're obviously very excited about this mechanism and see it as complementary to IUI. One of the key restrictions on this home energy saver loan is that you have to own the home. So it's not an option for renters. But I think
this is just
in
their
the
first
case
product,
of renters,
though, so...
like the landlord, like compelling a landlord to pay that as opposed to having to buy a whole new heating system at some point,
I'm okay with that.
Easier sell.
I was thinking about
So as long as
the
they're
low income
homeowners, that it would be a really nice match. And then they're only they've only got a loan for that much smaller portion.
Now you have your over the 16 programs you looked at, there is a 99.9% collection rate, which makes sense to me because it's on your electric bill. So, yeah, unless somebody who has been always paying their electric bill at a higher amount previously is going to stop paying their electric bill when it's at a lower amount, you're definitely going to collect that. One aspect of this, we might have spoken to you about this when we heard this presentation before, that has given pause to me, has to do with this is an investment that's being made by the utility. And presumably the utility is taking therefore an ownership aspect, an ownership in what it is the utility is investing in, which is actually located in somebody's home. And what happens if there is a default?
So Ipswich is not taking any ownership. This is in the terms
Okay.
and conditions, which I'm pretty sure you can access on our website in the toolkit, but I can also send them to you. Yeah, they and KP Law wanted to make sure they had nothing to do with the sort of ownership and ongoing maintenance. So it's written very clearly in the terms and conditions that the occupant is responsible for maintenance and fixes,
So it's
unless
really
there's something that goes, totally wrong, with the equipment while it's under warranty. Like the utility is taking initiative to know what the warranties on the equipment are, and so if they do get calls from customers, they can advise them. But for the most part, it's just they'll be directed back to the HVAC contractor.
So it would be sort of in the nature of an unsecured loan, really, because when it's paid off, the customer is going to own this product, right?
Yeah.
And now you're telling me the customer is going to own the product upfront anyway, but it's really a loan, right? Wouldn't you call it
Yeah,
that?
I mean, we're careful not to call it a loan,
Because
there's no single player obligation. It's a
it's like a betterment.
Yeah, it's a betterment to the property.
Uh-huh.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but not legally a betterment. It's just a similar structure. I don't know. We'd have to ask KP Law about that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're leading me into territory.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, some questions I could ask if we get further down
I think if it's a homeowner, right, and it's on the bill, and if the home is sold, then we would collect that money.
So typically, we talked about the iterations of this last week. Ipswich is allowing accelerated payment if a customer really wants to do that, or if they're selling their home and the buyer's insistent. But a lot of proponents of IUI actually sort of resent when utilities allow accelerated payment and think that shouldn't be allowed, and that it should just transfer naturally to the next occupant. Again, this is a cost-saving measure. So compared to the home with the fossil fuel system they would have purchased, they would have been paying higher bills, they would have had lower tech, less state-of-the-art equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So they're getting a better home, better equipment, and lower energy bills. So there's no reason that customer should have to pay it off. But Ipswich is what you wanted to make it as easy for customers as possible.
Yeah, I would think that if you're buying a home, that the owner would have to disclose that there is this on the bill, and that would be part of your negotiation with buying the home, whether the owner or the buyer pays off like a betterment. When you buy a home and it has a betterment on it for a sewer line, you negotiate that as part of your buying or selling of the house, and determine who's going to pay for that betterment, whether it's paid for upfront or by the new owner. Laura,
and we do have, oh, sorry.
Laura, you had indicated that a homeowner would be paying less on their electric bill. Their electric bill would actually be higher on this program because their utility overall utilities will be less, but their
Right.
electric bill will be.
Right, Ashley pointed that out,
Yeah,
that in the case of somebody who is increasing their use of electricity, but decreasing some other energy use such as gas or
Yeah,
their oil bill,
Yeah.
all of that is included in the
In
calculation
savings.
of whether they're paying less than they were
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Right, I got that. So I think if the folks who resent it when, I mean, this is, you could see why if some of you are buying a house and this thing is presented to you, you would have no idea what is this, you know, what?
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with this because I don't understand this. And the buyer might really be insistent that they want this cleared up before they buy the house. But I think if people who wish that it would just go on with the bill need to provide, the seller need to provide, you know, some tools for them to show
Sure.
how that's helpful, but I don't know how you ever get involved. You never know when somebody's gonna sell their house, so that
Yeah.
might not, you know, I just think
Yeah, I think the utility
it's
somehow does
understandable that people
know,
would
and
not
they
react well.
would be prepared to send information. And then in the case of rental properties, we do have a separate kind of disclosure that the landlord is obligated to share with any future tenants.
Okay. Then my final questions really have to do with where we would get the money for this, since we're not rural. You know, and I see that that Ipswich had to go to town meeting for permission to access that particular grant. And as you look at expanding this program to other municipal utilities, what are people thinking about as the source of capital for this?
Yeah, so speaking of the Massachusetts Community Climate Bank, I have been talking to them about IUI and educating them on municipal utilities need for external capital, and they're interested. I would say their interest is definitely peaked. And so we have a meeting upcoming in another week or so with them to talk a little bit more about whether they would provide like a line of credit at, you know, no or low interest for utilities to capitalize these programs. Because yeah, one thing we would love to do is to just have a kind of a solution that we can just like point every utility to, so that every utility isn't having to go out and like figure this out on their own. MWEC does have a pooled loan program for their members. I know you're not currently a member, but they do have a pooled loan with quite high limits at below market interest rates. I think Zoe said it was at about 3% right now, if I remember correctly. So that's you know, another option that we're looking at least for MWEC members.
Yeah, so that's the unfortunate, the beauty and the tragedy of MLPs is that we're all different, and we all have access to different different tools. And some are good for some and some are good for the others. But of course, when you look at your review and it says that the utility will save $10,000 per customer by, you know, enrolling them in this program and getting them involved on average, where you get your capital for this program is going to have a huge impact on
Right.
whether
Right.
you know how much you could possibly save. So that's something that we would have to, that's like at the top of my concerns when thinking about it going forward, and I don't know what the answer is. Okay, any other questions from staff or board members about the program? Are there any questions?
I think just
sorry, Matt.
A general comment. I think it gives you an opportunity to encourage homeowners within Ipswich or wherever to put together a plan on what can be done when and how to facilitate it. So I think that's good because it gets in front of them that it's doable without having to go through the process of finding contractors, vetting contractors, and the whole rigmarole is very time consuming, and if you're not particularly knowledgeable, is quite a challenge. Out of the pilots that you've done, Ashley, can you give an idea of the costs and the time period that this would go on for?
Sorry, for an individual home upgrade or for like running?
You've got 3 examples. Say the larger home, for example.
Yeah.
How much did the retrofit cost?
Yeah, the average cost was 35,000.
Okay, and then upfront cost?
About 6,000.
Okay, and then time to pay off, so to speak?
We sort of maxed out, so different measures have different periods. For the heat pump, I want to say the maximum period is about 14 years and that's being 80% of the measure life. Weatherization can go a bit longer, although you can pay back weatherization on a much shorter period. So we tend to just stretch that out and match it with the heat pump to bring down. I mean, we could pay it off in 6 years, but that would like increase the monthly tariff loss. So we stretch it out over the same tenure as the heat pump to bring down your total monthly tariff. And for the heat pump, hot water heater, I think the maximum tariff period is about 8 years, and we did the same thing there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to do the weatherization and the heat pumps as a one and not an either an or.
Right.
Solar depends on how much sun your roof gets, for example. That's very important. And the water heater, yeah, that's always a good thing to do, and that's less money.
Yep. Yeah, one other distinction I didn't point out that's worth mentioning is like the Mass Save Heat loan, it's a 7-year loan. So your like annual payments for that, if you've got a $35,000-$40,000 investment, are still quite high. One of the nice things about IUI is you're stretching it out over 80% of the measure life. You're taking that $35,000 payment and spreading it over like 14 years, twice as long. So making your annual payments smaller. And that's what helps with the like penciling of these solutions and lowering your upfront cost. If you were trying to get it all paid back in a short time period, you wouldn't experience any savings within that period of time. So these standard length loans are not very good for a lower income.
Right, and that's the advantage of the loan, or the money, or the responsibility basically going with the electric meter. So whoever is using that electric meter at that property potentially has the onus on them to pay it back. But again, if people are moving house more often than not, and is there a way, or just to reiterate, is there a way for them to get a payoff amount, the owner, to basically pay it out of funds when they sell their house, and then the next property owner is free and clear?
Ipswich decided to allow accelerated payment for people who want to make it. It's not something they're encouraging, but it's allowed.
But it would be easy to calculate, in other words.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be like a payoff for a car.
Yep.
Basically, if you wanted to sell that car, you get the payoff amount, you pay it off, and then be free to either use public transportation or buy a new car, or an electric car even.
Ashley, is each unit a separate line on the bill? So the heat pump would...
It is. Each measure is separate. We had originally thought we would lump it all as one IUI tariff, but through the pilot, we realized a couple things. One, these measures get implemented at different times. Sometimes you can have an elapsed time of like months between installation of one or the other. So that makes it nice. And it's also just like clearer for the customer to see when different measures drop off.
One thing we have
that's good.
Yeah. Although I feel like we have, one shortage that we have at our light plant is lines on our lines on our electric bill available to cope with situations like this. So we would have to get into that. So, and just one impression that I've had is, and tell me if this is right, it's probably just anecdotal, but it does seem like this program would be most valuable for people heating with oil. Because if they're moving to electric heating, they're gonna save more than people heating with gas. Is that your impression?
Given the current mass save incentive for whole home heat pump systems for gas, like that makes the
Does that
math work.
even it out?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like $10,000 versus I think it's either 15 or 3,000 they get from I can't remember what Ipswich's utility heat pump incentives are now, but it's a fraction of what they get for mass save. So even though the savings isn't as much with that like buy down of the investment, they're pretty equivalent.
That's good, because you don't want your customers to be very, very different one from the other in terms of how much they can benefit from a program like this. So that's a good thing, I think. Okay, unless there are other questions from the staff or the board, we'll ask if there's questions from the public. Sue, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, thank you for this very interesting presentation. I appreciate
please state your name and
it. Oh,
address.
Susan Wetzel, 239 High Street, Hingham. But thank you for the presentation. The question that I have is, would you be able to provide us with a PowerPoint presentation so that we can look at this at a later date, if that would be okay, and then make it available to the public?
Yes.
Yeah, that would
Yes,
be,
absolutely.
that'd be very helpful. And then the other question, you keep using the word tariff, but is my understanding a tariff is actually a tax? Is that true? At least.
Tariff is the word that the sort of everyone kind of promoting IUI is using for the line item on a bill. It's not a tax because it's tied to a very specific betterment of the property to which the fee is attached. I don't know what the origin of using tariff is.
Okay, yeah, because I looked it up because I'm not that familiar with the term, and I looked it up in Investopedia, and they said a tariff and is essentially a tax. And it also said that most people that have that end up paying more over the long run. But either way, I wasn't that familiar with it. The other question I have is if it's going to go out 18 years, if I understand this correctly, the likelihood of someone living in a home that long today is not 18 years. So the buyout option that I think Michael mentioned, was it you, Michael, that mentioned the buyout option, or was it you, Laura? In other words, if you wanted to pay
I think we were all talking about it.
Yeah, if you wanted to pay that off, my question would be, would that come at an increased cost to the homeowner? Or, because you're saying there's an equality here, but I'm a little confused how if you had to pay that off and it cost more, it wouldn't in fact benefit.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole philosophy behind IUI is to give sort of everyone kind of equitable access to these upgrades and to help people save money and be more comfortable in their homes. So I'm not aware of any programs where it is like encouraged or people are like endorsing early payoffs, because again, what the sort of mantra is like, these investments are saving customers money and making them healthier and more comfortable. So in the one-off situations where there needs to be an accelerated payment, Ipswich will allow that, and they will allow it for the exact same, the exact number of dollars left on the tariff.
So that would be a decision that would be made by the town.
Not by the town, by the person selling their house. I think the scenario that we've talked about is if someone is a homeowner,
Right,
participated in IUI, and then is
Right.
selling their home, and they have a
Right.
buyer who is adamant that they don't want this on their electricity bill. In
okay,
that situation, the light department will let the homeowner, the original homeowner, pay it off. Or they can provide this potential buyer with information about the program and get them comfortable about it and tell them why this is a better investment than the house next door that didn't participate and still has an oil furnace.
okay. Well, I think about that because there are a lot of elderly people here in town who will be selling their homes
Yep.
at some point, likely. And this is kind of the population that I represent, and
Uh-huh.
will be needing that income from the sale of their home to go somewhere else. So it's
Mhm.
kind of an important thing to consider here, because I think about 35% of the
Yeah.
population here in Hingham are elderly.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the
that-
way we see it is that, you know, elderly people who anticipate selling their home in, 5 or 10 years are not likely to make anything but an emergency investment in HVAC upgrades. Like, why would you, right? You're just gonna wait it out and let the next homeowner do that. But with IUI, it makes that option available to you because you pay and save for the time that you're in the home. You've improved the value of the home. You've got state-of-the-art equipment in there. You've lowered the utility expenses of the home. A lot of younger first-time home buyers now are very climate conscious and want an all-electric home. They don't want fossil fuels. So like, it's a win if like, wow, this is already installed equipment. Like, I don't have to deal with this among all the other things I'm going to need to do in the house to get settled. So I think it's easy to make a really compelling case to a homeowner of why like this actually makes the home, more attractive and valuable.
Those are really good points, actually.
I can see that
Okay.
if the elderly person has the $6,500 as the upfront cost, which was.
Yeah, and we could do the analysis for Hingham and get a more accurate estimate of what the likely upfront cost would be with your existing incentives, or if we looked at where might it make sense to bump some incentives up, where could you like drop incentives and put them into another measure to help reduce those costs. Like, that's something we could look at.
Thank you.
And I don't know, your electric rates make a difference too. I don't know how they compare to Ipswich's, but obviously the lower they are, the bigger the savings, the lower the upfront cost.
So one last question for me, Ashley, do you recall what the cost of the feasibility study was? And I'm asking myself if this is something that we could perhaps get a Green Communities grant to cover.
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but Brianna and Tom, has Lily sent over a proposal to you? I know we have it ready that sort of breaks down the cost of each of those steps in our IUI
Okay, well, if
toolkit.
we have
So
that
if she
information,
hasn't sent it, we'll get it to you today.
Okay, if we have that information, then we can look at that. That's great, thanks. I was just trying to get a ballpark idea, but
Yep.
if you have a better estimate, that'll be great. Okay, well, unless there are any other further questions, comments, then I just want to thank you very much, Ashley, for your presentation and your time this morning. This is really great to get started on having this conversation, and we will continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hope to talk soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ashley.
Ashley.
Thanks. So the next item on the agenda is board reorganization. This is our first meeting since the town election, and I think it's a good idea to, after each election, to consider whether we want to change the organization of the board. That would involve asking for nominations for chair, vice chair, and secretary. So I'm just going to begin by asking if there are any nominations for chair of the board for the coming year. Does
I would
anybody,
nominate Laura Burns.
does anybody want to nominate anybody else? Is there anybody else who would be interested in serving as chair? I want to be, we don't have to be super formal about this, but Um,
I'm fine continuing as we have been right now.
okay, not hearing a thunderous move to make changes. Is there anybody who would like to make a different nomination for vice chair or secretary, acting very informally about this? Tyler, are you tired of running down to the light plant to have to sign things that the secretary has to sign? And would you like to pass that off to somebody else?
I'm happy to serve in either capacity.
Okay, Mike.
Likewise.
Okay, well, how about if I entertain a motion to reelect the officers of the board as they currently are serving? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay,
Second.
somebody, okay. Mike, did you make that motion? Just asking. I'm entertaining the motion. Chairs
Oh,
don't make
I
motions,
will make that
supposedly
motion,
chairs
Laura.
don't make motions, so I'm just entertaining the motion.
Yeah, I will make
Okay.
that motion.
Okay, is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor, Tyler,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Laura, aye. Okay, thanks very much. Next item on the agenda is the income adjusted rate for general heating residential customers. So there's a new item on our agenda. Tell us about it, Tom.
Yeah, so what we've found is that we have some customers that would qualify for the income adjusted rate, but they're actually on the general heating residential rate. So we don't have a income adjusted rate for that.
Oh, because ours is only for the residential rate.
Right. So
But these are just residential customers, right? These are not.
these are just residential customers.
Oh, uh-huh.
So
So,
how are they heating, Tom?
That's an electric rate, so that they would have
electric resistance, right?
resistance heating, yeah.
So it's resistance heating and they get a special rate.
Yeah.
And they probably need relief more than the general residential customer who doesn't heat with
Or
heat.
they need heat pumps.
Yeah, well, they may need both. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes if the electric bill is paid by a renter, there may be an obstacle to
And that's
lowering their
probably
bill.
the case in many of these instances.
So do you have a
How-
recommendation, Tom?
I guess our recommendation would be to create an income adjusted rate for the general heating residential custom too also. So they would get what the right now is a 10% discount on the distribution and showing distribution capacity.
It's the customer charge and the capacity distribution and transmission.
Yeah.
10% on each.
How many customers are we talking about?
There's about 123 customers on this rate.
Wow, I had no idea it was that many.
And but not all of those would obviously qualify, would be just the ones that qualify for a low income.
Have you done an analysis of the impact, the financial impact to us?
We have not.
I mean,
and I'm not sure how many people are qualified. We just came across a couple of customers that inquired and did qualify because they're on a state program, but we couldn't give it to them because we don't have a rate, an income adjusted rate for this particular rate.
well, my personal thought about it is that those people probably need relief more than the people who are on the regular residential rate, but that I feel like it's prudent to look at what the financial impact will be, as we have with the other rate, before we do that. What do other board members think?
Yeah, I agree with that approach.
I think the difficulty there will be knowing who. Again, I think there's only a couple of customers that have called. And
Okay, on the other hand, they're high bills. So
Yeah.
if,
Ellen, is that true? Do you know? There's only been a couple of customers so far that have called on that?
Ellen, do you know the answer to that?
That's correct, just a few.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, I would, I'm reluctant to say it's de minimis without knowing it,
Yeah.
what it actually is. So could we possibly bring this back for our next meeting? And,
Sure, yep.
Uh,
We can
and
do
make
some
a decision
research.
there?
Yep.
With some numbers, that would help me get there.
So
Okay.
we actually had one that applied, that one's still waiting for the discount. And we've had maybe two that called to ask. They haven't applied yet, but they asked about the rate. So would be
Okay.
potentially 3 total.
So, if we could just look at what the impact of that, I mean, we made estimates based on what we know about our customers before we put in the previous rate, but we're still, we still don't know what the ultimate impact is going to be, and we don't have anything to go on beyond who's actually applying. So I feel like it's reasonable to look at who's actually applying and
Okay.
know what that is before we move.
And obviously the impact, going in the next few months will be less.
Mhm.
So.
So, is that okay with the board if we table this until the next meeting and we can have some
And
discussions?
we can always make them whole if they tried to apply for something that wasn't quite in effect because we'd missed it. And we took our time to do the due diligence. We can go back and make them whole on what they would have got had we made that decision earlier.
Would that present any administrative difficulties to try to do that?
We'll, would have to, address each customer separately.
Yeah.
So Fine credits,
but-
it's always time.
But so far, it's only one, right?
One or two, yeah.
We'll limit to
Okay.
5. How's that?
Okay, I just don't want to, yes. Hopefully we'll resolve this at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And that brings us to approval of the meeting minutes of March 12th, March 27th, and April 9th. Did anybody have any changes they wanted to make to those minutes?
I had a couple of small ones.
Mm-hmm.
The March 27th, there's an equation for calculating the kilowatt hour sales per year times an amount in dollars that's missing a zero. It should be 0.0025. And on the budgets, there's a sum of 35 million mentioned. We should probably put a $sign in front of that. That's it for me.
Okay. Any other suggested changes? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve all 3 sets of minutes with those changes suggested by Mike.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Mike,
Aye.
Tyler,
Aye.
Laura, aye. Thanks. So do you have a hard stop, Tyler, at 9, or can we go a few minutes more?
I can do a few more minutes. Yeah.
Because I think we didn't get to our updates at our last meeting, so I was hoping we would go. Okay, so let's take a look at the financials and then hopefully we can get to the updates. Okay.
You see that?
Mhm.
Yep.
All right, so kilowatt hour sold, again, a little higher than in the past 3 years. Our revenue is in line with the past 3 years, and our expenses are slightly below last year, but in line. Net income for the year, for the month was 385,000, which is obviously higher than the last few years. When you look at our year-to-date income, we're at $1 million, which again higher than the last 3 years. So we are monitoring our net income because obviously we don't want to be over the 8% at the end of the year. So Joan has taken a good look at that. We may at some point have to lower our PCA to ensure that we don't go over the 8%, but right now we're holding off to see what April brings. When we did look at our power cost analysis, we are running below what has been budgeted, particularly in February. We were way below in February what we had budgeted for our dollar per megawatt hour. When we looked back at 2003, we're actually running below what we our energy costs in 2003 also. So we're gonna have
And that's dollar per megawatt hour, not volume.
that's our dollar per megawatt hour.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And our actual, just looking at our.
Could that be related? Could that be
Yeah,
related
but-
to usage during peak times or?
Well, just looking at the megawatt hour usage. Compared to budget, we're running slightly below our megawatt hour usage also. But
Okay.
in line with 2003 really overall. So again, Joan just kind of looked at this the last couple of days to see, to see what's driving our net income. So we'll take a better look at this, and again, we'll make a decision on the PCA based on April's numbers.
Tom,
Yep.
do we know what net income number would put us over the 8% or roughly
For the year, you mean?
for the year? Yeah.
Joan, did you look at that?
I did. I want to say it's like 5.5, but I can get to the exact number. But our budgeted net income is about 2.8.
Yeah, but so our how much would it put us over the 8%? About 5%, are you saying over?
I think the question was how much is 5%, 8% of gross plant, a maximum net income? And I think that off the top of my head, I want to say it's 5.5.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, any other comments, questions from anyone, staff, or public or board? Okay, so we can move on then to our updates. Transmission project.
Transmission project, right now, we're hoping to file with the siting board in early June is our target.
It seems every month it seems to move, it moves one further,
Yeah.
1 month further.
Yeah. So we're trying to get that through to get it to the siting board in June. We do have a meeting. We just got a date for a meeting with the zoning and planning board, a joint meeting in Hingham. That's going to be June 4th. I just got that date yesterday, so we will be putting a flyer in the bill this month, advertising that meeting. That is it's kind of a courtesy meeting.
Is that meeting that you have before you go to permitting, just to lay out the issues?
Well, so we are going to the siting board. This is going to be a combined filing with the siting board. So the siting board will ultimately have jurisdiction over the planning and zoning. But we want to go to the planning and zoning boards still to get their input, so we can ensure that whatever they're looking for is included in our,
My recollection is that it is a requirement of the town that if, since they are allowing us to lease the site, or they've transferred control of the site to us, that we're supposed to make sure that all zoning and planning concerns that are local to Hingham are included in our application to the siting board. And
Correct.
furthermore, having that agreement all settled before we go to the siting board will help us move through this. They're gonna wonder about that. They want to know, and it will help us move forward.
Yeah.
Do I have that right?
Correct. Yep. So we're not trying to bypass them in any way, but
Right.
the
But now is the time to,
well, we can do that even if we were to file before we had that in place, we can still incorporate that into the filing afterwards. So it's
oh, okay, so it could be an ongoing
it could be
process
ongoing.
until we reach agreement on all of those issues. Okay.
Correct.
So we don't have to do it, we don't have to get it all done before we, okay, that's a relief, because every month seems to be the month that we are not filing with.
Right. And it's moved and moved and
Yeah.
moved. So
So
I
I hate to
love
move
to
it
get it
anymore.
filed so we can get the process started. And
Okay,
let's get in line.
great, thanks.
Our solar here, everything is built. We're waiting on some piece of equipment that is key to being able to energize it. And right now that equipment won't be available until October. So everything's built, but
Man,
not online. The car chargers in the front parking lot and at the rear of the building are all operational, but the solar will not be operational until sometime in October. Municipal solar, Laura, do you
yeah,
want?
okay, so municipal solar is now, we have expanded the task force has expanded its view and is working with the PACE program that was recently adopted by the town to reach out to commercial commercial building owners in Hingham, to connect them with the PACE program for any kind of energy efficiency, solar battery projects that they might want to engage in. We're just busy arranging what our outreach is going to look like. And on the municipal solar side, the proposal that we made to the town in January has had no response. So, we're trying to figure out what to do about that. But, I mean, when you talk to them, they're all very interested in exploring the possibility of putting solar on our municipal buildings, but in reality, they don't seem to have any, that we would need their time and attention, and they don't have any available. I think that's what the message is on that. So we're gonna continue to try to work with that. I think that's where that is. But we already have one commercial customer who is very interested in working with our program and the PACE program, and this will be a great trial for what we can offer and how we can facilitate commercial customers getting what they need, which would just be a consultation role for us. It doesn't involve any kind of investment, just us helping them get it done, which I think is a great role for us in the community. And that's kind of where we are on that.
All right, landfill solar it's pretty much been combined.
Yeah, I think we can take that
Municipal
off the
solar, yeah.
update list now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Capital projects, we're beginning work on Circuit 9, which is the biggest part of our capital plan for this year. The telephone has set the poles on Main Street, so that work will be beginning in the next week or so out there. The demand response program, I just got word from E&E yesterday that they had been working or trying to work with NetPeaker and MWIC to do a combined program, but MWIC yesterday indicated that they were not willing to combine the two programs. So E&E is now working with NetPeaker to put together a program for E&E customers. So I talked to John Zimmerangis about it. Told him that, we're really looking to get this program going. We've been waiting a long time. John has indicated that, to give him a little bit of time, middle of June, and hopefully they'll have something in place. by then.
But probably not in time for our next meeting to talk about it, our next meeting, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So another 2 month delay.
Yeah.
If we want to wait for. So I'm just gonna point out that while the board has said we want to have a demand response program, which demand response program we have is a decision of the general manager, so just have to ask you, Tom, what your thinking is on this.
Again, I mean, we're an owner of E&E. You know, obviously I would like to do it with E&E, but you know, and again, they did do their due diligence with Generac, and that program was, you know, supposed to go, and then Generac just pulled the plug on it altogether. So it left them in kind of hanging in a bad spot, which was why they went back to Netpeak, who they had spoken to you know, prior. You know, they were part of that, the negotiations for a demand response program in the early stages. But Generac
see.
had a better you know, was offering a better program at that point. You know, it's a little disappointing. I think that E&E and MWIC can't come together on a program, because I think it would lower our overall costs, you know, for the program.
It is very disappointing, but of course we don't have any leverage with MWEC, so
Yeah. So,
whatever they decide, I guess.
yeah.
That's very disappointing, yeah.
Are
So
there
your,
other
so your
vendors,
suggestion is
Tom?
to wait.
My suggestion is to give E&E until the middle of the month to come up with something.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mike, I spoke over you.
Sorry, are there other vendors
Right
that
now,
you could go with? Because it seems to me like we're going to end up with two programs, just
again,
with a different administrator.
you can do a program on your own, you know, with a completely different vendor, but they're cost prohibitive because we're so
Okay.
small.
Gotcha.
Okay, and the last item on our update is time of use metering project. I think we kind of made a decision about that last month, so maybe we can take that off the
Yep.
regular update list. We kind of had to know where we're going with that. Okay, and that is at the end of our agenda. I just wanted to check in about future agendas before we go. Tom, you had talked about having E&E and to talk about our portfolio
Yeah.
next
So
month, maybe?
I had talked about next month, but the financials, our audited financials are completed. So I'd like to get them in June. And then maybe in July, we'll have E&E come in and do their annual update.
Okay, sounds good to me. Anybody else have any? Yes.
Yeah, Tom, when we have E&E come in to talk about our portfolio, I'd love to have them make sure to cover how we're matching up our contractual energy with our actual usage on an hourly basis, you know, and seasonally.
Okay.
You know, and sort of what the net benefit or sort of cost is to the light plant of being unbalanced on an
Okay.
hourly basis.
Yep, we can have them cover that.
Great. Anything else? Okay, I think all we need is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, Tyler,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Laura, aye. Thanks very much, everybody. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take care.
Very good.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.